Welcome to this week's prophecy update. Thank you so much for joining us. Please feel free to put any comments or questions in the chat section or in the comments section. Well, I want to start with this. Jesus said these words in Matthew 24 as the disciples asked him about the end times, the sign of his coming. When is the timing of all of these things going to be? That God's prophetic plan for the end times. So we know that Jesus starts out by telling them, do not be deceived, right? That's the first thing he tells them about the end of the age. He says, take heed that no one deceives you. But the very next thing he says after he gets done explaining the deception part of it, that's going to happen, is he says this in verse 6, and I'm going to read verses 6 through 8 of Matthew chapter 24. Jesus says, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. So again, one of the things that Jesus lists in what is the tribulation period going to look like is wars and rumors of wars. So as we're approaching the tribulation period, we're seeing an increase, an uptick in wars and rumors of wars. And so I believe we're seeing that today, and even just over the past week, especially the past few days, yesterday, and a few days before then, we're seeing an uptick in rumors of wars. And the word rumors means reports or news or information about wars, and not necessarily an actual war itself, but just, hey, we're reporting these things about wars or potential wars. We're seeing an uptick in that directed toward the United States, which is really interesting to me because we don't see the United States as in end times Bible prophecy, right? The United States right now is the world superpower, militarily, economically. Although we're going down, we're on a really steep downward spiral, right? But we're still currently the world power, and you don't see the United States in end times Bible prophecy. The question is, what happens to the United States, right? And so, could this line up with that? We don't know, but for sure, to me, it's really interesting. And anytime we're talking about conflict with the United States, and even this first one is talking about potential conflict on U.S. soil, we want to pay attention to it. So the first article I have says this. This is from the American Military News. It says, nuclear strike on U.S. threatened by Russian state TV. And I just want to read a couple things from this article and just see what it says. So it says the most important message. This is what the Russian state TV news people were reporting. It says the most important message we should send to the Americans is that we will not wage war with you in Europe. Korochenko said in a translated video shared on X, formerly Twitter, by Anton Gerachenko, a Ukrainian internal affairs advisor. So the Ukrainian guy is saying, hey, look what Russian guy's saying. It says Korochenko, the Russian guy, also stated, in response to your attacks on Russian military or civilian facilities, the first strike will be a preventative, limited strike against targets, listen, on the territory of the United States of America. So he's threatening, right? This would be a rumor of war, a Russian strike against the United States on United States territory, not in Europe, not over NATO, Crimea, not over there. Here, he's saying he's threatening that. It says the military experts in Russia that would discuss the use of tactical nuclear weapons. And he's saying this because it says there were warnings by NATO against Russian aggression, and specifically it says Hodges, who's the NATO guy that was talking about, hey, here's basically what it says. Hodges is a NATO guy that was saying the allies of Ukraine should help Ukraine defeat Russia. But let me read it from the article. It says Hodges, again, he's a NATO spokesperson, has urged Ukraine's allies to provide the country with the necessary weapons such as Army tactical missile systems that would allow Ukraine to retake Crimea from Russia. Ukraine would then presumably be able to conduct effective strikes on the Crimean Peninsula, according to Hodges. So the Russians responded to that by saying, hey, we're not afraid to strike the U.S. on U.S. territory. So again, interesting. That was reported September 5th, so yesterday. But interesting that they would say that. Does that mean that's going to happen? No, we're not sure. It means that they're just talking about, again, rumors of wars or rumors of conflict. But the reason that I grabbed that was because there was a couple other reports of conflict with the U.S. from other countries as well, just again in the past few days or the past week. And so this one is also from American Military News. This is also from September 5th. It says Chinese spies breach U.S. military bases, government sites 100 times, officials say in a report. So it says the FBI and the Department of Defense have documented over 100 incidents of Chinese nationals posing as tourists to gain unauthorized access to U.S. military bases and other federal sites, saying that the Chinese are sending people over disguised as tourists to try and get information, basically U.S. military intel. They're trying to gather that. It says, labeled as gate crashers by U.S. officials, these individuals have employed various methods from crossing into restricted missile ranges to swimming near key rocket launch sites, according to information obtained by the Wall Street Journal. So it says about 10,000 controlled turnarounds every single day happen in the United States at any of its 1,400 gates. So that's a common thing, but it says this specifically about kind of the China's thinking or mentality on this. It says the strategy suggests the Chinese government is willing to risk exposure, banking on the fact that even if a few individuals are caught, proving nefarious intent beyond trespassing would be challenging for U.S. authorities, while the information obtained by successful operatives would be immediately and immensely beneficial to China. So they're saying, hey, it's totally worth the risk for China to take this risk, even if a couple guys get caught, because what they're going to gain from the ones that don't get caught is really beneficial to them. And so I thought that, again, that coupled with these three articles I want to reference today was really interesting. Again, the first one I said was there are threats from Russia to do a strike on U.S. soil. Again, rumors of wars based on what's already happening in Russia-Ukraine conflict. So here's the third one I want to reference. This is from the Daily Mail, and this the title of it's this: Kim Jong-un tells North Korea to be ready for war with the U.S. And this was reported August 29th, so this was last week. But it says North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has called for his military to be constantly ready for combat to thwart rivals' plots to invade his country, state media said on Tuesday. So he's calling out Japan, South Korea, and the United States for doing military exercises near North Korea. He's saying, hey, you guys are doing this to try and intimidate us, and we're going to be ready to go to war with you guys. It says North Korea views such U.S.-involved training as an invasion rehearsal, though Washington and its partners maintain the drills are defensive. So again, he's telling his people to be ready for war with the U.S. South Korea's foreign ministry expressed deep regret over Kim's use of very rude language to slander the South Korean, U.S., and Japanese leaders. Spokesman Lim Susak told the reporters that North Korea must immediately stop acts that raise tensions with reckless threats and provocation. So South Korea is like, hey, he should be quiet. Like, he shouldn't be doing that anymore. And it says in Washington, the South Korean ambassador to the U.S. said South Korea, U.S., and Japanese efforts to improve relations would not be deterred by Kim's rhetoric. So they're saying Kim Jong-un is just trying to antagonize us or threaten us and to get us to stop doing what we're doing, but we're going to keep allying with Japan and South Korea. And so, again, just interesting that we have all of these three articles recently within about a week of each other, and the two of them were from yesterday, specifically regarding the United States and conflict with the United States. And so I was reading a few days ago as well that there's over 110 armed conflicts happening right now worldwide. So again, increase in wars and rumors of wars. And those aren't full-blown wars. Again, those are just armed conflicts that I was reading about on a certain website the other day. So again, uptick in chaos worldwide and threats of wars even against the United States. And so I think this for sure plays into, well, Jesus tells us it's going to be like that in the end times, right? In the tribulation period, he says that's going to be one of the things that marks the tribulation period, but also because we're not in that time yet and the church isn't going to go through the tribulation period, I know this, that the chaos, the more chaos there is, wars and rumors of wars, all the stuff with COVID, all the stuff with transgenderism, all the racially motivated stuff that they're trying to push, right? The division that the government's trying to cause, all of that is to their benefit because the globalists can use chaos in order to gain more control over the people, right? That's their plan. That's what they want to do. Why? Because if they can create and cause most of the chaos, right? They cause most of it. Other times it just happens. But they can use the chaos in order to get us to comply with things that we wouldn't normally comply with, because when people are afraid or people just want to go back to normal, they'll do things they normally wouldn't do, and they can get us to give up freedoms that we normally wouldn't give up in order to get out of the chaos, right? It's the Hegelian dialect where they create the problem and then offer the solution, but the solution is most of the time worse than the problem, and the solution always involves giving up control and giving up freedom to the elites, to the leaders, to the globalists. So they want control. We know the future Antichrist system will be all about control, and they're going to use a lot of the chaos that's happening to gain that control. So we're going to see an increase in this. And so I'm saying that to say the next part of this. I want to read from Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25, because I think this is huge. God tells us to do this in his word. Again, we're seeing an increase in not only wars and rumors of wars, but all of the things Jesus mentioned that would mark the tribulation period. And it can be a difficult time, even for Christians, right? It can be a really, really difficult time. It can be overwhelming. It can be hard to live during this time. So this is Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. Look what it says. It says, verse 24, "And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching." Well, listen, we see the day approaching, right? Because we're watching, we're ready as Jesus commanded us to watch and be ready. But also, God says here in Hebrews chapter 10, do these things as you see the day approaching, or as you recognize the time or where we're at on God's prophetic timeline, you should address that time, or you should live like this. And he gives us some very specific things. And so I just want to talk about those for a few minutes. The first thing he says in verse 24 is, let us consider one another. And so consider, that word means to contemplate, to be concerned about, or to fix your mind upon. So be concerned about who? One another, our other brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, or think about or contemplate your other brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ. And that's a verb. It's in the present tense in the Greek. And we know this from Bible study, that if it's a verb in the present tense, it's a continuous action. It's not just one time, it's happening over and over and over. So as we're reading the word and we're going through this time and we're seeing, the Bible says, hey, as you live in this time, continuously do this. We should be doing that, right? What does he tell us to continuously do? Continuously stir up love and good works. Stir up means to provoke love and good works, or to motivate people or encourage people to love and good works, right? Provoke them, or do or say something that causes someone to respond. For the believer in this context, it's you guys think about each other, consider one another, encourage one another with your words and actions to love, to stir up love, right? Motivate them toward love, live out love in your life and good works. Or keep loving each other and keep doing what God told you to do. And in verse 25, he says, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves, but listen, do that more as you see the day approaching. So gather together more with other believers in Christ as you see the day approaching and stir up love and good works. That's what we should be doing, and that's what we should be focused on. So as we're watching and we're seeing the things in the news and how the Bible explains exactly what's happening and exactly what's coming, God says, hey, this is how you should be living during this time. Gather together more. And I think this is really important to say because I want to say it like this. Be in fellowship with other believers more as you see the day approaching. And specifically this, don't let your expectation of perfection keep you out of fellowship. And here's what I mean by that. There's some people out there, and it's listen, this is getting more and more and more because we're seeing the apostate church more and more and more. So I understand that. But there's some people out there that are not fellowshipping with other Christians because they're being too picky about what they expect from a church, okay? And so I want to pause right here. I understand fully that there's people out there that they don't live by a Bible teaching church, right? Maybe they live in a small town, kind of out in the boonies somewhere, and there's maybe a Catholic church and an apostate church there that are not teaching the word, and that's why they don't go. I'm not talking to those people right now. I'm talking to the people that live around, within a half an hour to 45 minutes of Bible teaching churches, but they're refusing to go to those Bible teaching churches because they're being too picky about the church and what the church is doing and how the church is conducting service. Don't be so picky that you stay out of fellowship just because the church isn't doing exactly what you want them to do. And here's what I mean by that. If there's a church near you and they're teaching the Bible verse by verse, chapter by chapter, and they're going through the word and they're doing the best they can to minister to people, and even if they're, again, Bible teaching church and, pre-trib eschatology church, pre-millennialism, maybe there's a few other things that aren't perfect with them. I don't think that's a reason to leave that church, right? If you're staying home and doing church online and you have a church like that near you, but maybe there's a few things you disagree with that are not a big deal, not huge doctrinal issues, go in fellowship to that church. Why? Because God has gifted you specifically to be in fellowship with other believers. And I think, and I know this for sure, you have spiritual gifts. Each one of us does. So as we stay out of fellowship, because we were meant to do fellowship in person, right? We're robbing other people of the gifts God gave us to serve them, right? In 1 Corinthians 12, it says the Spirit gave us gifts for the body of Christ, right? To edify the body of Christ. And so you're robbing people of the gifts God gave you to build up the body as you don't go in person to that church. Also, you're robbing yourself of the encouragement they can be to you. Okay, so be in fellowship if at all possible, right? I understand there's situations where you got to be online just because that's what the situation calls for. But if possible, don't be too picky with the churches around you. Go be in fellowship, be with the believers there. I wrote this down. It takes faith to fellowship with other believers because at some point you're going to offend one another. And sometimes that's why people don't want to be in fellowship, because they've been offended and they've offended, and that's hard. Relationships are hard, even when you're filled with the Spirit, right? But don't let that stop you from being in a relationship. Being in fellowship. Being offended as mature Christians doesn't mean we walk away, right? Being offended means if I'm offended by my brother, either it's a small thing and I need to just let it go, or if it's a big enough thing, I need to do Matthew 18 and go to my brother if I have an issue with him and work it out with him, right? Don't let those things keep you out of fellowship. And I wrote this down as well. I just want to share a couple more things. If you're going to church, right, maybe you're going to a church. So if you're not going to a church, please start going to a church. If there's a Bible teaching church around you, go. Okay, get in there, get in fellowship. And maybe you are going to a church, but you're kind of not engaged, right? You go, you sit there, you don't talk to anybody, and then you leave right after service. Listen, be engaged in the church that you go to, even if you have a shy personality, because we can't be obedient to these verses in Hebrews chapter 10, which is, again, stir up love and good works and assemble together all the more as you see the day approaching. You can't do that if you're not talking to people and fellowshipping with people. So the challenge this week to you then, if you're already going to a pretty good church and you're like, okay, I'm in fellowship or I'm going to church, is be engaged at that church. So step out of your comfort zone this week and maybe meet a few new people at that church. And here's a really good way to meet people and get in fellowship with people at church. Serve in some ministry, and that's a really good way to just meet the other people that are serving in that ministry, and go to church functions. Serve and go to church functions that they would have outside of a Sunday morning, and be engaged in that way. So I just wanted to end with that. So part of the direction that we should be being pushed biblically as we're approaching the end times is Hebrews chapter 10, 24 and 25, and that's to be in fellowship with one another. Super important. We need more encouragement as the day approaches, and as times get darker and times get harder, we need to gather together the more. So please consider those things. Write any questions or comments you might have in the comments below. If you need help finding a good Bible teaching church, and you, especially if you live in New Mexico or anywhere near where we are, we're 30 miles south of Albuquerque, New Mexico, in a small town. If you live anywhere in New Mexico and you need help finding a Bible teaching church, let me know. Also on Pastor Brandon Holthouse's website, which is Rock Harbor Church. I can't remember the name of the website, but you can Google Rock Harbor Church. He has like a church tracker that lists Bible teaching churches near you. So you can check that, and maybe there's a good church that you can try on that. But God bless you guys. Again, questions, please put them in the comments section. Please please share this. Please get the word out. Jesus is coming soon. God bless you guys.